Hello, and you're very welcome back to the Game On Fantasy Football Podcast. Yes, we've got a different name, but we're just bigger and better than we always were. I am joined by Phil McGrath from Fantasy Premier League Transfers.com, and soon by Paul Caffrey, also from said Fantasy Premier League Transfers.com. He'll be joining us shortly. Phil, welcome to the pod. It's great to be back.
We're back.
We are back.
Good to see you.
It was just the pre-season training was a little longer than we had planned.
Yeah, it took a while to get up to full match fitness, shall we say? But we've ironed out the kinks, and we're back and ready to go.
Speaking of kinks, just to give our pod listeners some explanation, there were a lot of things we had to figure out over the summer, technically and otherwise, and we have done so. Everything is done, and the pod is going to be bigger. It is going to be better. We're sorry. We're genuinely sorry that we weren't there at the start of the season, but we are back. We're going to stay. And we are going to continue to give you all the information you need to know from game week to game week for the rest of this season. So the good news, I suppose, is we've only missed a couple of game weeks. We're not very happy about it, but we're back, and we are back to stay. So Phil, how have you been getting on briefly so far this season?
Yeah, going all right. I mean, I had a good start to the season. I was very, very pleased with possibly one of the best starts I've had. It's tapered off a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but I'm getting there. It's getting back into some sort of shape now. Obviously, like I said, I kind of dropped the ball for 2 or 3 weeks, but back up and running. Good, decent score last week, so I'll be hoping to push on now and certainly stick it to Mr. Caffrey this season. Yes,
Mr. Caffrey should be joining us very shortly indeed. I suppose, should we look back at the sort of the last game week that we've had?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose given that this is our first one back, it might be no harm just to do a brief overview of what we've learnt over the last 8 weeks of the season, I suppose. There's been some very interesting results. There's been some interesting performances, good and bad. I suppose the obvious place to start as United supporters is with Man United.
I was thinking Arsenal. I was shouting about the shit at Arsenal there.
Yeah, well, listen, we'll get to Arsenal. There's plenty to speak about there. I mean, I suppose for United, you've really got to wonder what's going on there. It's been some time since we've seen a convincing United performance, and for fantasy managers, there's been a lot of worry. Obviously, the debate pre-season and certainly over the first couple of weeks was 14 million, do you and don't you? In terms of Robin van Persie, me personally, I steered clear. Very pleased with that.
Me too.
Very pleased with that decision thus far, although he did get back in the score sheet last week. But I mean, again, at the price he's at, it's certainly a lot of money to be putting into your lineup, and it could limit you elsewhere. And the United midfield, as usual, fails to produce any decent regular returns. I mean, it kind of says it all when you look at the United point scoring from the midfield that Adnan Yunanzi, or Yudnanzi, or whichever way he's pronounced. Go on.
My one is Januzaj.
Januzaj. That's probably correct, actually.
No, Januzaj.
Januzaj.
Yeah. Everyone has to have their own.
Too shy to sigh. Hush, hush, Januzaj.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I'll play you that next week.
Nice. But I mean, considering he's the top point scorer from the United midfield, it kind of makes you wonder. Very few clean sheets at the back, and you really have to try and see, well, what is Moyes at United. I mean, we've seen him bring in Fellaini, hasn't really had an impact. I know Paul has his own opinions on that, and here's an interesting one for you. In 1921 to 1922, United hired a new Scottish manager.
Yeah?
Yep.
What was his name?
Let me finish. They had the same 8 results that they've had in the opening 8 weeks of the season.
Did they win?
They ended up relegated.
Hey!
So that'd
be a story.
Let's hope that doesn't reoccur this season. No, it's highly unlikely.
I mean, if he makes Man United into Everton, then at least we can expect a top 6 finish.
Oh, look at it this way. Moyes spent 13 years trying to get Everton above United, and he's managed to do it.
Yeah.
So
in a couple of months.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Magic. But I mean, that's kind of United. Obviously, then I suppose Arsenal, after their opening day defeat, you kind of feared the worst for Arsenal. But Wenger, being very un-Wenger-esque, I suppose, put his hand in his pocket. He got rid of that short arms and long pocket syndrome and splashed the cash for Ozil, and certainly. What an impact.
And also, I know it goes sort of under the radar, but a young man returning by the name of Matthew Flamini has made a huge difference to the back, although he's not from a fantasy football points, but he allows all of the rest to go forward.
Yeah, he certainly does. He's had a huge impact at the Emirates. I mean, when you consider his age and experience within the game, and obviously his previous time spent in North London, he certainly settled some of the younger players, and I think that they will have learned from him But you're right, his anchoring role has certainly allowed the likes of Ramsey and Wilshere and Ozil obviously to push forward. And
what a goal from Jack Wilshere the other day.
Yeah, but it's been beaten already. Last night, Kasami's goal for Fulham, what an absolute cracker. And Jack Wilshere himself, in fairness, straight as soon as the goal went in, kind of sent out a tweet and said, "There goes my goal of the month award."
Yeah.
And he's dead right. It was a quality goal from Kasami. But
I thought you were going to talk about the young lady from Piedmont Rovers.
Miss Roach, yeah, I seen it. And fair play to her, a great goal. And she's actually
Stephanie Roach, if you're looking on YouTube, by the way.
Yeah, Stephanie Roach's goal for Piedmont United against Wexford Youths. They won 6-1. And Miss Roach has been getting quite a bit of publicity for that as well. She was on Sky Sports News this afternoon, talking to the lovely people there about her goal.
Yeah, she was on the Game On regular programme as well yesterday evening as well.
Yeah, so listen, great goal. Her first goal of the season as well, she scored.
She scored 2 that day, and she scored 2 now this week as well.
Yep.
So she kick-started her season. So good goals flying in all over the place.
Good goals.
Great goals.
But yeah, I mean, for Arsenal, I mean, there's any number of options to be looking fantasy-wise, and we'll go through those when we get to our featured games. Outside of that, obviously, Liverpool have also had a great start to the season. I don't think there was many Liverpool fans would have thought that they would have started the season in such a fashion, but there you go. There's the Suarez and Sturridge debate that we'll certainly get to as well. Outside of them, Chelsea, Manchester City.
Oscar, leading scorer for Chelsea. Samuel Eto'o, though, has just opened his account.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Took a while.
But he's up to speed.
He got a goal. So yeah, there's a couple of options there. And then Tottenham are still thereabouts. We know they brought in a lot of players, the likes of Paulinho, Soldado, Chadley. Those players have come in and they've bedded in quite well. Chadley maybe hasn't really got a whole lot of game time.
Lamela hasn't even started yet.
No, Lamela hasn't started, but that's largely down to another factor which we'll get to again when we go through the games.
Manchester City as well seemed to the slow start to the season. They looked a little bit higgledy-piggledy, but now up front they had a bit
of a creeper. Yeah, they kind of just
finding their groove now.
Certainly have. I mean, for the early portion of the season, I think a lot of fantasy managers simply the only coverage they had really was at the back with Zabaleta. But as the season's progressed, that certainly changed with the likes of Yaya Toure, obviously with a set piece prowess has certainly popped up with goals. You're looking at David Silva now is back and fit and he's in contention, and Sergio Aguero has sneaked up and caught a lot of people by surprise with his goals this season, and is another one to be considered
for sure.
And then you've got young Robbie Brady at Hull who's done well. Obviously he was
by the way, Man United 11 points after 8 games. Hull played 8 games, 11 points.
Yeah.
How many of them down to Robbie Brady? Quite a few, I'd say.
I know he's got 3 goals as far as my memory serves me this season. And
all winners, I think.
As far as I remember, yeah. And he's done quite well. Obviously, they missed him. He was out for, I think it was 2 weeks after he had a hernia operation. Has returned quicker than expected. He played at the weekend.
He's got guts. Hey.
He's Irish. We weren't expecting him to return so quickly, but there you go. He has. And we've just completely passed over the Toffees. Roberto Martinez has done very, very well. Inconspicuous start with typical Everton draws. But since then, they've pushed on. Romelu Lukaku, the surprise loan signing, which I think a lot of people are still questioning, has been a revelation since he joined. Obviously, young Ross Barkley has certainly come through and he's starting to show what he can do. And I think Gareth Barry was a good addition to the squad to add some steel in the midfield that they were certainly missing. So, I mean, again, there's options there. Seamus Coleman had a good start to the season. Leighton Baines has started to bang in some goals. He got 2 goals, I think it was in game week 6. Ironically, he said the 2 goals came from the fact that Leon Osman told him that he wasn't doing enough and he dropped him from his fantasy football team. So Baines had dedicated those 2 goals to Osman for dropping him. So there is plenty for fantasy managers.
coming back as well looks good. So
yeah, there's plenty for fantasy managers. Southampton have been solid at the back. They're doing really well now at the moment as well. And there's one or two options for the Saints to have a look at. We've any numbered so far this season. There's so much that's happened over the first 8 game weeks of the season. There's too much for us to cram it in. So I think probably the best thing to do is welcome Mr. Caffrey onto the podcast and let's get kicking off.
It's about time for Paul. All right, here he comes. All right, time to look at game week 9 as it is, and delighted to say we're joined by the boss, Paul Caffrey from somewhere. How are you, Paul?
How's it going, guys? How are we keeping?
We're keeping very well.
Looking around Manchester.
Yes, I know.
Well, good to hear that.
Have you bought any midfielders yet? Right, bear with us. We're going to crack on with game week 9. I suppose, Phil, 3 featured games. Where are you going to start?
Obvious place to start. Is it Selhurst Park, I suppose? Palace welcome Arsenal to London. Well, it's not much of a trip for Arsenal, which is good for a number of reasons. And this one certainly has this one certainly has points on offer. Looking at the two games, I mean, obviously we saw Palace last night were beaten 4-1 by Fulham. Two great goals, one from Kasami that we've already spoken about, and the other from Steve Sidwell. But certainly for Palace, that game will have knocked the wind out of their sails. Having gone 1-0 up through Mariappa, you would have expected them perhaps to push on against the Fulham side that have been poor on the road over recent seasons, not just this year. But Fulham, credit to them, 2 special goals to get them back in the game, and that's 2 wins and a bounce for them. But Arsenal, obviously, as we kind of touched upon at the top of the show, have been in great form. Over the last couple of weeks, they're unbeaten since game week 1, 6 wins and a draw, and they've got 18 goals in those 8 games, with half of those coming on the road. So, there certainly has been a case over previous seasons that Arsenal have been, more free scoring at home, but it's level pegging at this point of the season, and certainly there's plenty of points on offer in this one. What do you think, Paul?
I think there are stunning points on offer. I mean, if we look at, say, what you could nearly call a holy trinity, maybe going a step too far. But if you look at Ramsey, Giroud and Ozil, very difficult to have none of those in your fantasy team. Especially, I mean, when we look at it, they've delivered so much. I mean, Ozil has delivered what? I mean, if we add it all up together, they delivered about 24 either goals or assists over those kind of that 9-game period. And you take into consideration that Ozil missed the first couple of games of the season because he wasn't an Arsenal player at that point. It's stunning. Even just the way I've seen Giroud become a provider. I mean, his assist for the first goal for Jack Wilshere the weekend was excellent. And then the fact he gets the ball and he actually puts it on Ozil's head for Ozil to score a header. I wasn't aware that was really a part of his game for both of those players.
Well, it's not. I think it's not really. I mean, obviously, even Ozil was surprised. I see him put a tweet out after the Arsenal game, and even he was surprised that he scored a header. So it kind of goes to show you the amount of those he scored over the lifetime.
Did you see him doing his
career.
trick with the little chewing gum before the game? Where he
2 or 3 weeks ago, he chewing gum in his mouth. He spat it out, kicked it up, and then caught it in his mouth again. Can't say it's hygienic, but it's pretty impressive.
He does it. It's his little trick. It's his pre-game warm up, and he takes a little round chewing gum, the size of a marble, a small marble, and he does several tricks with it and ends up with it in his mouth. Very impressive. He does it also before German games as well, so you can check that out.
I saw him. He did it again the weekend. He did about 4 or 5. So I think Sanya actually got on his way when he was doing it, so he wasn't able to get it back in him at that time. But
should get extra bonus points for that.
He's some player.
Looking at Arsenal, like we said, they've been so impressive. They're the best in the league.
Are a bit of a disappointment, though, are they? So I was very disappointed with them. They only have 1 clean sheet, and that came, I think it came against Tottenham of all teams. So I had invested in Mertesacker, thinking with it might be a good option with their, I suppose, attacking threat from corners. But do you see that changing, Phil, or is that something you think that they're going to continue to leak the odd goal here or there?
I think from Arsenal overall,
who cares? They're going to score 4.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think they will. I think this week certainly Mertesacker is a good shout at 5.5. We've only seen, like you said, 1 clean sheet from the Gunners, but I'd be fancying them this week to pick up a clean sheet against Palace. When you look at Palace's scoring record, their top goal scorer is Dwight Gale with 2 goals, and one of those came from the spot against Sunderland, as far as I remember, back in game week 3. Which incidentally was their last win also. So you've kind of got to look at it and say, well, really, where are the goals going to come from? I just don't see them troubling the Arsenal defence.
Would you write off Palace and Sunderland as relegated already and as Wigan boys, or do you think they're going to turn it around?
I think Sunderland could turn it around. I think you have to let Gus Poyet have a little time there to get things.
Yeah,
they have got a decent squad if you can just pull them all together and make them play the same way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Although the latest odds would suggest that Ian Holloway is on his way out. He's now 6-4 to be the latest manager sacked, which I think could be fair to say. He already had a meeting after the game last night with the powers that be at Palace, and he was very shy about answering questions and that in his press conference that I seen. And he was asked had he ever considered his position, and in typical Holloway fashion went on to say, well, I was a midfielder when I played. I never really considered playing at the back or up front, and he kind of just laughed and said, is that what you meant? I completely dodged the question the way he does.
Yeah, he didn't do his interview on Sky. I'm not too sure whether that was related or that was something separate, but they were kind of referring to it constantly, and they never got him on the phone up on the coverage last night either.
Obviously, we're not going to go near Crystal Palace players for this week. Apart from the Holy Trinity, as you mentioned, Paul, we might throw Wiltshire into that as well. If
2 goals in 2 games, it's a bit of a stretch for me.
Yeah, just if people were looking for, if they couldn't afford to go up to 6.8 for Ramsey, they might be able to afford 6.1 for Wiltshire.
Yeah, it's an option. I mean,
despite the fact he doesn't smoke.
Yeah, no, he doesn't smoke. I certainly think it's
not
worth.
At all.
It's worth having 3 Arsenal players. Me personally, I have Ozil, Ramsey, and Giroud. I have all 3 of them, and they haven't let me down yet. So I can't really argue with that. And Arsenal as a whole, I mean, they're creating a chance every 6.3 minutes, which is the 5th best in the league. But their conversion rate is the 2nd best at 14.9%, just behind City.
Did anyone think when Wilshire's goal went in the other night? Did anyone just say smoking?
No, but I do now. Just you, obviously. But yeah, I mean, for Arsenal, listen, it's Ozil is obviously the one to be having a look at 10.7, 2 goals, 4 assists, not to mention his goal in the Champions League. Aaron Ramsey, 6.8, 5 goals and 3 assists. And obviously then you've got Giroud, who's there as well with I think it's 4 goals and 3 assists, if I remember right.
You're right there.
4 goals and 4 assists. So yeah,
4 and 4. Yeah,
they're the ones for me. And then Mertesacker.
Well, I think what we also have to look at is how excellent the goals that they're scoring are. They're truly great goals. I mean, Ramsey went past 4 players to score the weekend in the box. Like, that's insane. It really is. I will just make one comment on Wilshere. I had him at the start of the season, and he drove me mad because he didn't get the points, and obviously Ramsey did, and I quickly made that switch like most. But he'd be probably one to, at all costs, try bring in those 3 Arsenal players because they're well worth it.
All right.
Yeah, there is, just to finish up on Arsenal, there's one small piece of consideration you've got to put into it when you're looking at Arsenal players, and that is their fixtures over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, they haven't had an easier start.
Well, it's not some. Do you know what? The actual level of their opponent doesn't necessarily worry me. It's the amount of games they play and the fact that rotation may be an issue. I mean, we've seen Ramsey was rested going into the game at the weekend, and the only reason we saw him introduced was that Flamini picked up that head injury and had blurred vision and had to come off.
It's amazing. We've had this whole conversation for about 5 minutes now about Arsenal. We haven't spoke about a young Spanish man, little fella by the name of Santi.
Yeah, he's not. You know, we follow the points. And
well, he's only coming back into the team.
He is only getting back in. I mean, that's the other point, that this kind of goes hand in hand. You've got to look at it. That Cazorla's been out, Arteta's been out, Podolski is still out, Walcott's still out. I mean, these players, where are they going to fit in? I don't even know if they are going to come back into it. But I mean, looking at Arsenal's fixtures, they have, I think it's 7 games in 20 odd days. So it's Dortmund in the Champions League tonight, Palace on Saturday, then October 29th they play Chelsea at home, November the 2nd Liverpool at home, November the 6th it's away to Dortmund, and then they travel to Old Trafford on November the 10th. There are a lot of games, and Wenger did himself state at the weekend in his post-match press conference that, you know, they will have to rotate things around a little bit, so just be wary of it. But I think probably you can fairly put your hat on the fact that Ozil is going to start all of those games if he's fit.
All right. Anything else to say about this, or should we move on to our second featured game?
I think it's time to move on.
All right. Where to next?
I think we'll start at Old Trafford, Paul. What do you reckon?
Old Trafford, Manchester United and Stoke City. Surely we're going to get a reaction and 3 points on the board, says the United fan.
Yeah, I mean, and we spoke briefly about this at the top of the show. United have been entirely frustrating this season. They haven't really been doing it. They've only won 2 of their last 6. They've conceded 9 goals in 6 games, and 3 of those came at home. So okay, on away form they are shipping more goals. Rooney's the top man in terms of points this season with 3 goals and 3 assists and 6 bonus points.
Does anyone have Rooney in their team apart from me?
Paul?
I have Rooney, yeah.
Yeah.
He was playing great football up until this weekend. He was actually a little tour in the game the weekend, and we could highlight a number of reasons why, but sure, I'll let you continue there, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, Van Persie then is the other option. You know, he got his first goal last weekend since game week 4. Now, obviously, he missed out 1 or 2 of those through injury. But interestingly enough, for fantasy managers, he also saw his first price drop prior to the kickoff of game week 8, which seen him now drop to 13.9. Still not enough of a drop to entice me into bringing him in. But
when you look at Van Persie, right, playing for United, so I'm going to the games, I'm seeing him. He's getting very little of the ball. United are not playing well as a team. They're not attacking fast. They're kind of passing side to side, and they're not cutting through teams like they used to. Other teams are coming to Old Trafford now, thinking or in some cases expecting to win. So when you look at 14 million, he's a luxury. Even 13.9, same thing. But he's not getting the chances now because the midfield aren't making the chances for him. So we've seen very, very little of the ball. And I'd be very interested to see what his shots to goals ratio is, because he doesn't get a lot of shots, doesn't get a lot of that. So really, I mean, I know at the start of the season it looked great. He got his 2 goals away to Swansea. Everyone thought, right, here we go, Van Persie's going again. It really transpired that Swansea really just had a bit of a sluggish start due to their kind of possibly their European campaign that made them start the pre-season a little bit earlier. And since then, you're right, yeah, he scored against Crystal Palace. Obviously, he got that goal the weekend against Southampton. But far too infrequent, and you can really nearly write him off now, because unless things dramatically change at Old Trafford, he's not going to get anywhere near the points he did last season.
Yeah.
And they're starting to lose the crowd now, which could be a big problem, because there's a lot of people to turn against you if it was to happen.
Yeah.
Now they are doing a lot to try to stop that. For example, there are posters. We all remember Sir Alex Ferguson's speech when he wrapped up at the end of last season. You have to support the new manager. As everybody is walking up to their seats, they've got posters of Alex Ferguson and that speech, and that part in particular followed the new manager in bold writing. So United are really doing everything to support the manager, but a period of transition, I don't see where the points are going to come from. I don't see him getting that many points.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and just going back to Van Persie, you were wondering what his shots to goal ratio is. He's had 27 goal attempts, 24 of those in the box. Only 9 of those have been on target. He's averaging a chance every 21.6 minutes with an accuracy rating of 33.3 and a conversion rate of 14.8. That is ridiculously low from a player that we saw so many goals from last season. And you're right, it's not necessarily down to Van Persie not being Van Persie. It's the fact that the United just aren't creating those chances.
And if he is getting a chance, it's a half chances from miles out.
One player that is impressing us is a young man. We've already mentioned him in the intro, Januzaj. I'm going to pronounce him as 20 points. He hasn't played a lot of time, so he's I suppose he's bounced on to into our sort of consciousness against Sunderland away from home with those 2 magnificent goals. But a lot of people have brought him in, Paul. He's, I think he was 4.5, now up to 4.9.
Yeah, we started the season at 5, dropped all the way down to 4.6, and now he's up to 4.9 again.
The first time we saw him was he came on as a late sub against Crystal Palace. And Crystal Palace went down to 10 men. In truth, the game was actually really, really boring, lackluster affair. But every time he got the ball in that match, he made a start towards the goal. He went from the wing, turned infield from the left, and was going, and he was scaring the Crystal Palace defenders. He had a few good shots, And late on, actually, in that game, he was actually taken down and got an assist for the free kick which Rooney scored that day. If we look at him, he also played against West Brom. Again, I know Manchester United lost, but he was the brightest spark in that. He had a number of shots in that game. And then obviously he had that spectacular performance against Sunderland, which has led to myself bringing him in, and probably in a lot of people. I'm not sure what his ownership rate is, but at that price, it looks like probably be a nailed-on starter for at least the next couple of games.
6.4 only.
Value.
6.4.
Only 6.4. I'm surprised that it's that low. I wonder if that could be a fact that a lot of people have played a wild card and have a settled team. But if we, I suppose, if we look at him and why that we're going to be, I suppose, considering him, it's really a case that he's very similar to, say, what we're seeing at, I suppose, the likes of Andros Townsend for Tottenham. And it simply is the fact that when he gets on the ball, he's looking to get into the middle, running towards the box, or getting into central areas when he can. And that just means he's going to get goals because the boy's not afraid to shoot. So I'd have him circled here as probably the only United player that I would have, or I'd recommend people to have in their team. Now, I do have Rooney. But again,
how do you feel about Rooney, Paul? I mean, I know we've spoken about the United players probably misfiring up front, or the midfield failing to create the chances that they did last year. How do you feel about having Rooney on your squad at the moment? Almost 11 million.
What I've seen with Rooney, he was absolutely fantastic in every home game up until the one just gone. Running the show, not making a mistake, really loving his football, looked really, really threatening. In truth, was probably very unlucky not to get a lot more points over that period. Now, the weekend, his passing was a little bit loose. We kind of saw the kind of disheartened, pissed off Rooney that probably lost his place in the team towards the middle of last season. Now, what concerns me is he seems to be a character who maybe works on confidence or he goes on runs. And there was signs the weekend that he's a player who's kind of about to go off form and things aren't going for him. So I reckon if that shot that he took hit the crossbar and goes in, he goes on and he has another great performance, probably man of the match. It didn't go in, one or two passes went a little awry, people got onto him, and he just didn't have a good afternoon. And even for Van Persie's goal, we see it's down to Rooney making a mistake. He should have scored that, and he didn't, you know. And so I would have thought that prior to last weekend's game, he was a player about to come into form, and he was getting a steady amount of points to justify keeping him there. Last weekend's game has worried me, so if he puts in another poor performance in his next game, I'd probably be looking at selling him, and I suppose tough as it is to say, then Aguero will probably be the player to come in, but we'll probably chat about him in a little bit.
All right. Before we do that, has anyone any other Manchester United players to talk about other than Januzaj and Rooney?
No, I don't think United are really keeping clean sheets at the back. I mean, you can argue that this one is certainly worth a look given that Stoke have only scored 2 goals in the last 6 games. It kind of says it all when your goalkeeper is your top point scorer. They've only had 25 shots on target. And they've only converted 4.2% of those, which is the lowest in the league. So yes, you can certainly make an argument for United defender this week for a clean sheet, but is it enough to bring one in just for one game? The answer's got to be no.
All right.
There's a bit too much rotation in that United defence as well.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, you mentioned Stoke. Obviously, Mark Hughes heading back to former days of glory. Are we going to go anywhere near Stoke?
No, I've no one there for me worth a look.
And other than Begovic, probably most people would agree. Paul?
Yeah, and some people had invested in Wilson. He was playing in midfield earlier in the season, but getting defender points. That looks like that's coming to an end now as well. So,
yeah, I was one of those.
There's no one there.
All right. Third featured game this week is?
Well, having mentioned Aguero, I suppose we'll go on probably what is the biggest game of the weekend. It's Chelsea welcoming City to the Bridge. This one is going to be a cracker. I fancy it. I don't think it's going to be one of those. This is going to be great, and then it just fizzles out. I'm hoping for a better showing than when the last time the two sides met. Last November was a 0-0 draw, but both of them have only lost one of the last 6. Chelsea have had 3 wins and 2 draws. City have had 4 wins and 1 draw. Chelsea with 3 clean sheets, City with 2 clean sheets. This is where you kind of see the big difference in the side. So Chelsea's top point scorer, John Terry, 47 points. City's top point scorer, Sergio Aguero, 56 points. So, from that, you kind of, it's defence versus attack. Obviously, we mentioned that Eto'o got his first goal for Chelsea at the weekend. Probably should have had 2. Really, when you think about the goal that he kind of made whilst fouling the goalkeeper. However,
also an assist last week as well.
Guilty. It was a guilty conscience there coming through.
Do you reckon? Yeah, he doesn't strike me as the guilty conscience type of guy. He's a striker. Those guys are ruthless.
I'd be with Phil on that one.
But I mean, this one has points plastered all over it for me. Oscar, we were a little disappointed to see him rested going into last weekend, but
still managed a cracker of a goal.
Yeah, came off the bench, got a goal. I think the keeper probably should have done a bit better for that.
Well,
you could say it was stunning. I think the keeper could have done better. That's just my own personal opinion on it. I mean, obviously the reason he was rested was due to his international commitments. So after the amount of travelling he'd done, there was no surprise really to see him rested, but very pleased to see him come off the bench
Hazard
and get a goal.
Very good as well.
Hazard's hitting form again. He's Chelsea's third overall point scorer with 43 points, 3 goals, 2 assists, and 5 of the bonus points as they were. And really, I mean, Chelsea have been over reliant on their midfield. I think if Eto'o can get some goals into him now, I think we can see Chelsea push on. But as it stands, you've really got that decision to make. Is it Oscar or Hazard? Mata hasn't really figured. We've seen a lot more of him in the last couple of weeks than we did at the start with that kind of. There was much talk around him and whether he was really a Mourinho type player, and I think Paul wrote a piece on the site, and it was indicative of what Mourinho was trying to do. It's fantasypremierleaguetransfers.com.
Okay,
and it was very much about how Mourinho was trying to break down a player and then build him back up again to give him something he didn't have in his game. And Paul was right. Sorry, Paul, I won't say it too often, but yeah, you were right. That was exactly what Mourinho was at. I don't
It only
know.
happens once every
Well done,
so
Paul.
often.
Well done. Well done.
I don't know if it's worked or not. We haven't seen a whole lot from him in terms of returns, but certainly from a Chelsea point of view, I think it really is an Oscar versus Hazard debate, and I think John Terry at the back is one to look at overall, not necessarily for this week. Looking at City, yeah, it's Yaya Toure, Aguero, and now David Silva's back in the mix, having returned. Great performance.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when we look at that. Obviously Aguero has gotten a lot of points over the last couple of games. That's coincided with Silva. So Silva got obviously that great goal the weekend. He got 2 assists over the last 3 games. Whereas we look at Aguero, and he's got 6 goals, 4 assists. He's only actually played 7 games, so he hasn't played everything either. And some of those have been substitute appearances. And the other side of it is he's now a differential. He's 11.1 million. He only has 11.1% ownership. So there is a lot of, if you get him into your team, you're going to be getting ahead of people. And if we look at this game, this is a fixture. The City City generally do all right in this. Normally there's a couple of goals. I think it was 09-10 where it was that 4-2 win. But generally you see a lot there. Would you, I suppose, nearly argue that, I suppose, having duos is always a good thing, but Silva and Aguero, would you see that as a sound investment for the coming kind of 4 or 5 weeks, Phil? Maybe sit with your 3 Arsenal players?
Yeah, it's something I'm looking at. And I actually spoke to Andrew off air about. I have Michu in my team, and I've 0.6 in the bank. So straight away I'm looking at that. And after Michu's blank last week, despite the fact that Swansea scored 4, I'm kind of going right. Michu out, Silva in. After that, I don't really have the funds for Aguero, but where did it become available? Yeah, I think I'd be all over that. Having said that,
right,
there's still options. I brought Oscar in last week. He came off the bench, got me a goal. I'm very pleased with that. So I could be potentially looking at a midfield lineup of Ozil, Ramsey, Januzaj, Oscar, and Silva.
Stop boasting.
Which I'd be very, very pleased about. The only one of those that you kind of have to put any kind of caveat on is Januzaj, and that he still is a young player. I think that Moyes will kind of maybe rest him a little bit. I don't think we'll see as much of him as people may expect, but at that kind of price, he's grand to sit in the bench. But going back to this one, I think you're right, Paul. I think there's got to be goals. If you looking at the stats for Chelsea, they're top of the league on minutes per chance created, so they've created a chance every 5.2 minutes. City, they're 4th in the league, creating a chance every 6.1 minutes. Mm-hmm. City, however, are top when on the conversion rate. 16% of their chances lead to goals. So that's a phenomenal rate. Whereas Chelsea, on the other hand, obviously we know their strikers aren't scoring, which is seriously affecting their conversion rates.
Although I think Etu at 8.6, if he gets on a hot run, which he's capable of, he's definitely has the talent, he definitely has the ruthlessness, as they pointed out already. 8.6, if he gets on a good run and he has that midfield providing, he could bang in a couple of hat-tricks.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, he certainly could. There's been question marks over whether he's the Eto'o of old that we've seen over previous years. I don't think he is. He's lost a yard of pace, but they always say that first yard is in your head. He's got that awareness about him. He's just missing that confidence. Certainly, if he can get it, I think we're going to see more. But like I was saying, Chelsea's conversion rate is at 9.7, and when you consider
what price is Eto'o in the game?
8.6, I think.
Yeah.
It's pretty good value
that's tempting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is for a man of his quality or his previous quality. If he can refine some of that, 8.6 looks like a bargain.
Yeah. If Lukaku draws a few more blanks like he did the weekend, kind of showing why Mourinho didn't keep him, that's a possible exit strategy right there.
Yeah, it certainly is. So you've got to look at it. But that I was astonished looking at the stats. Like I said, that Chelsea are top of the league when it comes to creating chances, but yet 8th when it comes to taking them.
Can I ask you a question about? I mentioned Pablo.
But that's just said there's no strikers.
Exactly. So if that's what I mean, that's where they're hurting. The fact that the strikers aren't scoring. But if they can get that right, Chelsea could really challenge this year.
Back to Man City, the defence. Pablo Zabaleta, man, we all had in our team all of last season. Probably he was dropped on Saturday. Hasn't been scoring very well for a couple of weeks. Paul, what's your reaction to Zabaleta?
Zabaleta, City started well. He was in a very, very poor game. I think it was against Cardiff where he was at fault for 2 of the goals in that defeat. But what we've really seen is we've seen a Manchester City team who they're kind of relying on their attacking strength as opposed to their defensive strength. So when Mancini was there, he very much got the defence right first and then worked on the attacking piece. Pellegrini seems a lot more balanced. So what that means, I don't think we're going to see as many clean sheets as we did in the Mancini days, which you're looking for a defender who gets clean sheets, that's rather disappointing. But I think we will see a lot more goals up top. Then really their style of play, when they play away from home, they're going to probably concede a couple of goals. So you're really now looking at a player who you'll have him at home for his potential of clean sheets, and then for his attacking abilities, you'd have him in your team. But I really don't think that he will hit the levels he hit last season. So,
yeah, I mean, looking at the City lineup last week, you've got to bear in mind that they're in Moscow for Champions League action tonight, I think it is. So they made wholesale changes at the back with Mika Richards coming in, Garcia and Nastasic and Clichy playing. We haven't seen that back four before. Usually you've at least, I know Company didn't travel, he's still injured. At least you've either got Lescott or Company, one or the other in there. And Zabaleta has been a mainstay, and then you've Kolarov as well. We haven't seen those with this, and I think that possibly it is just down to Champions League upcoming. I mean, we know the Champions League is really where City are trying to focus their main. They've had two very poor seasons in the group stages, and will want to make sure they get out of those. So I mean, maybe we're reading a little bit too much into the fact that Zabaleta was dropped, but certainly he's not really doing it. So you gotta worry.
Okay, I'll put a little tick beside him. All right, let us move on. They are 3 featured games now. It's time for Best of the Rest. All right, let us go down through these then from the top of the fixture table. 3 o'clock on Saturday, Aston Villa and Everton. Of course, Villa coming on the back of a defeat to Spurs at the weekend at home. They play at home again. Everton are the visitors this week. Phil, it's a tough one. Villa are on. They're playing some good stuff. Do you think Everton are going to force a draw, force a win?
I mean, there's a number of options to look at, more so from Everton than Villa. But really, in this one, it's the battle of the strikers. It's Benteke and Lukaku. Benteke made his return from injury last weekend, came off the bench. And the game really changed when he came on. You know, the crowd in Villa Park got behind the team. You know, there was certainly an extra impetus in their attack, and Benteke had a good chance, a good header that probably in other weeks he would have scored. He's probably just missing that little bit of match sharpness, and I think if that goal had gone in, it would have changed the game completely. As it was, it didn't, and we know how the result ended. So at 8.8 million, Benteke with 4 goals is up against Lukaku at 8.1, who also has 4 goals. So it is kind of one of those, one or the other. I think a lot of people are sitting on Lukaku at the moment due to Benteke's injury. But both are highly capable of goals.
He's
this
good
weekend.
value. I mean, he was up to 9.3 at one point in game week 5, I think, and then he's now down to 8.8.
Yeah, I mean, then that's largely down to his hip injury that's seen him miss a couple of weeks. It's a tough.
Everyone sells the strikers when they get injured, you know.
Yeah.
I think when it comes down to it, Benteke is probably a better player than Lukaku. And he's absolutely more consistent. The consistency piece will drive you absolutely crazy with Lukaku. When he's great, he's probably one of the best in Europe. But when he's not, he is deplorable. So, for me, I mean, a lot of people have Lukaku. You're going to stay with him just because you don't want to waste the transfer, what appears like for like. But realistically, if Benteke kind of shakes off that hip injury, obviously only about 15, 20 minutes a weekend, well, then it's going to be a case of, well, he will probably be the better choice, even though you'll absolutely expect Everton to finish higher than Aston Villa in the table.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly evident last year. We obviously seen Villa's finishing position, yet Benteke was thereabouts at the top of the goal scoring rankings. Outside of that, in this game, I mean, we've seen Morelos promise so much at the start of the season, frustrated greatly, failed to deliver. Now he's starting to show some signs.
Pinar back from injury as well.
Yeah, Pinar's back. I'm not sure how he's going to line up, whether he's going to retain a starting position. I mean, obviously with Barkley in there, Barry in there, Morelos is there. Obviously the injury to Darren Gibson probably means that we're going to see a lot more of Barkley. It's going to be interesting to see how Martinez lines those up. I just hold fire on him. He wouldn't be on my hit list at the moment. Certainly this Barkley will be a cheaper option who we're fairly certain will be assured game time, and we know what he's capable of driving at defences. I mean, when I spoke earlier on at the start of the show about the 2 free kicks that Baines got, both of those came from Barkley being brought down, you know, driving runs of defences and just, you know, creating chances. So I mean, there are options there to look at the back. Obviously Baines is another one. He's still a little bit too expensive for my liking in terms of returns.
7.7.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. I think Seamus Coleman is one that is certainly cheaper, and and comes in at 5.6 million. But with no clean sheets now in their last 4, the early promise shown by the Everton defence is going to worry people. But Coleman, we know, will get forward and will chip in with the odd goal and assist.
I'm in a position where I have Kane in the team, and I'm going to give him a couple of weeks more to keep going with him. But Coleman, I think, is very much living off the fact that he had a great game week 1 and game week 2. He's done nothing since.
Yeah.
So on that side of things, I think, look, it's one or the other. But I wouldn't even be, I suppose, recommending Coleman at the moment. He's not getting the points and they're not getting the clean sheets.
No, they're not. I mean, like I said, realistically in this one for me, it's the battle of the strikers. I don't see a whole lot coming from either of the midfields, with the exception of possibly Barkley. So it's kind of make your mind up on those.
All right, let's move on to Anfield. Liverpool are hosting West Brom.
It's the SAS, isn't it?
Suarez, Sturridge.
Yeah, I think it should be SAOS. So it should be Suarez and or both, because realistically, and I've seen a couple of managers do this, they've brought in both players over the last couple of weeks since Suarez's return, and it's done them no harm. I'm not a big fan of doubling up on strikers from the same team, simply because if they've an off week, you are very, very exposed. Different story with midfielders. There's a chance at least one of them can save your bacon, or you've got 2 or 3 other midfielders who you can fall back on. But if you have 2 strikers who fail to score, you're reliant on one. And if that was last week and your third striker was Lukaku, you were bunched.
Apart from Sturridge and Suarez, the two obvious ones up front.
Clean sheet for Liverpool, I think, this week.
Yeah, Gerrard 8.9. He's probably never been that cheap in a couple of seasons. He's still pulling the strings there.
Yeah, he is.
Coutinho gone as well.
Coutinho's out. I brought in Moses when Coutinho got injured. We know Moses was going to get the game time. Had a good debut. Picked up an assist. And after that, didn't do a whole lot. And he got sold. He's out. He got sold last week, and he won't be back anytime soon. I can see the point behind Gerrard at 8.9 million. Certainly, he's one to consider. Set pieces and spot kicks, you've got to fancy it. He recently picked up his 100th Premier League goal, which is some achievement. But for me, in a midfield, where you've got the likes of Ozil, Ramsey, Oscar, Hazard, Silva, Barkley. And they're only the ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head. There's a few more thrown in there that you consider. He just doesn't quite make it. But I do think Liverpool have the potential for a clean sheet this week. I think West Brom, as we know, have been poor. Goals have been hard to come by for them. And the way of looking at it is Liverpool had a great start to the season. 3 clean sheets in a row. Glenn Johnson gets injured. Haven't kept a clean sheet since. Johnson's now back. I'd be hoping that maybe his return can help shore up that defence, despite the fact that Liverpool are playing this new system, which is a 3-4-1-2, something along those lines, with attacking wing-backs with both Johnson and Enrique. Now, Enrique's a doubt going into this one. Driving on, I think we can expect Johnson to do quite well, and he'd be one that'd be a sneaky differential, but I certainly think that a clean sheet could be certainly on the radar for them.
On the West Brom side of things, the only player that's stood out for me, but I wouldn't be bringing him in this week, is Malfitano. 5.2.
Yeah, I'm still not sure about him.
He's a good player.
Yeah, myself and Paul spoke about this actually last week. And we were saying, weren't we, Paul, that it's too early to tell with him. We've seen glimpses, but not enough to hang your coat on. All
right, well, listen, we're not going to hang our coat on anywhere near him this week, but just one to keep an eye on, one for the watch list. Let us move on to Carrow Road, Norwich versus Cardiff City. Nothing jumping out at me here. Phil?
No, I've nothing earmarked. Johnny Howson for Norwich has scored 2 goals in 3 games. Maybe worth a look.
4.9.
Cardiff for me. I've got Cocker at the back, but he's more just covered in defence. I'm not really fancying anything elsewhere. Like I said, there's far too many options around the park to be looking at.
Paul, anything for you from Norwich and Cardiff?
There's nothing I'd be really looking to bring in. There's better value elsewhere.
All right. Speaking of better value, Pochettino has done wonders at Southampton since his, his strange entry last year, but he really has done very, very well. He has them playing. So Southampton at home to Fulham on the back of their 4-1 away win. Surely Fulham aren't going to win 2 away games in the bounds, Paul.
No, I would say definitely not. That's possibly a banker for your accumulator home win. If we look at it, what's Pochettino doing? He's brought great structure and great shape to the team. Everybody knows what they have to do. They're very good at keeping the ball, keeping possession. They will limit the other team to few chances. simply down to that style of play. Luke Shaw's one to be looking at. I mean, their defence is very, very solid, but he's playing left back and he's getting forward at every opportunity. He will get assists, maybe even the odd goal. So that will be someone to look at. Obviously, then you've kind of, I mean, their strikers, there's not really enough. It's probably not going to bring in a striker.
No.
Adam Lallana, he's a nice kind of, the way he floats around, takes a few shots from he's one that's not worse. He's not bad.
Yeah, I have him.
An argument with Davis in midfield, but it wouldn't be for me. He's holding in behind the trio, but he does take the odd shot. Probably your midfield is probably going to be too good.
You're talking three defenders really that people are talking about: Lovren, Fonte, and Shaw, and then Lallana in midfield. That's it.
Don't forget Artur Boric.
Artur Boric,
I have him in as one of my two goalkeepers.
Me too.
And he's done me absolutely no harm whatsoever with the clean sheets. I mean, they've only conceded 3 goals all season. 3 goals all season. Of those 3, only one of those has come with St Mary's, and ironically enough, that was actually against Sunderland. But since then, they hasn't conceded a goal in over 270 minutes at home. I mean, Fulham, we know, struggled away from home. They did pick up 4 against Palace. I wouldn't be reading too much into that. Prior to that game, they haven't really done a whole lot away from home. And I think that they've only managed 1 goal. Again, that was against Sunderland, so they have something in common there, and that was back in game week 1 and that goal was really very much against the run of play. But just going back to Lallana, I think it's certainly one to look at if you're looking for a differential in the midfield at 6.2. His leveler against United last week means he's now scored or assisted in each of the Saints' last 4, yet he's still only has a 3% ownership. So at 6.2, we certainly want to consider, with games against Fulham this week, Hull, and a trip to Stoke on the cards before the fixtures kind of get a little bit tougher.
All right, Paul mentioned, and he was asking a question about Sunderland. Are they already too far behind now? Sunderland, obviously, they've had their 1 game under Gus Poyet, but now they get to host Newcastle at the Stadium of Light. Obviously, if Sunderland are going to win 1 game all season, this is the one they'll want to win. There are some good players on the Sunderland squad. I don't think any of us are going to be bringing any of them in. Giaccherini, we've all spoken about him in private since he came in, wondering would he settle from Juventus. He is a good player. Still, none of the Sunderland players scoring enough points for us to bring them in.
No, I mean, there's nothing at Sunderland there for me.
Paul?
They're not scoring goals. They've got 1 point so far.
1 point. 8 games.
Yeah. I mean, if they've got 1 actual Premier League point, they're not going to get you any fancy points.
Bardsley, interesting statistic with Bardsley. When you look at Bardsley, who's just been brought in, by the way, I mean, he's just played 1 game. He's minus 3 points.
There you go.
So
that tells you kind of everything you need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, Newcastle were an interesting proposition. I mean, we spoke on Fantasy Premier League transfers about Ben Arfa over recent weeks and his seeming return to form. That's kind of wavered a little bit over the last couple of weeks. We've seen Remy pop up with a couple of goals, and has as a result, fantasy managers have kind of got in and backed him a little bit. Johan Caboyes has returned after his kind of
not a bad goal at the weekend.
Got a good goal at the weekend. He's 2 goals and 1 assist.
It was a bit close for him, mind you.
Well, he's only played. He's only in his last 4 games. He's 2 goals and an assist, which isn't bad because I mean we know he missed some of the season, obviously, as he was forced to train with the under-21s and the reserves due to his wanting to leave for Arsenal. But he's come back in, and
he wouldn't have got his game now in Arsenal. He would have been better playing for United.
That's it. He's probably lucky. He's probably lucky he didn't go to Arsenal because I don't think he would have got his game. You're right. At 6.2 million though, I think.
There's a couple of points to look at there, though. If we look at the Ben Arfa game, Everton destroyed Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, went 3-0 up at half-time. Ben Arfa was really blamed for that. So that kind of knocked his confidence. He got taken off, he got dropped for the following game. And really, Pardew went after him there. If we look at Gaboye, I mean, he's very lacklustre. When he does it, he's great. And in truth, he was very, very close to joining Liverpool over that transfer window. So on that side of things, I suppose it was widely expected for him to put a good performance in because it's, Liverpool have kind of 15 or 16 first-team players and they're short on midfielders, so they're going to be looking to pick someone up in January. So the cynics are saying that was a come-and-buy-me performance. And then when we look at Remy, probably not the right place to talk about it. He's in some sort of trouble there. So on that side of things, I think it's October, November is when that's all going to, I suppose, effectively be addressed. So on that side of things, you're probably wasting a transfer if you look to bring him in. So I wouldn't really be, I suppose, bringing in Newcastle players. That's a long way of saying that.
All right, less legal problems at Swansea, I hope. Swansea at home to West Ham, going on the back of a very impressive victory. West Ham, they're
did
up
well,
and down.
yeah, did well against Spurs at the Lane, and then we're beaten well by City. City were very, very good on the day. There isn't really a whole lot in this I'm fancying.
No.
Like I said, I have Michu.
You're getting rid of him.
He's going. He's kind of just about done enough to hang around, but not enough to impress. So I think it's finally time. Like, I actually can afford to. I don't have a transfer I desperately need to make elsewhere, so I'm going to pull the trigger on him this week. Boney picked up a goal last week.
He's a good goal scorer. I know he got one from the penalty spot.
It was the penalty spot.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've kind of got to look at that. But for me, I'm not really.
No.
Ben Davis is one that worries. I think a lot of fantasy managers brought him in. He has the potential to get down the left and get you some assists. But having just returned from a knee injury, I think he's now gone out with his ankle. So, you've got to steer clear of that.
A couple of Swansea players on the watch list. That's probably the best thing to do at Swansea.
Pablo Hernandez is probably the best one to keep an eye on. He's just returning as well, but I'd hold fire for the moment.
And de Guzman got a nice goal the weekend.
Too few and far between.
Too few to mention. All right.
He'll do that. He plays too deep now.
Yeah. West Ham, obviously they're still no Carroll up front. Vazte didn't look bad at the weekend.
He got his little overhead. I mean, the only one there for me that might be worth considering is Ravel Morrison. But again, there's a lot of opposition for places in your team, and he probably won't cut it. He's getting a lot of hype from the English press. Whether he's going to live up to that or not, I don't know.
At 4.5, you'd be probably better off with Jean Auger.
Yeah.
For 4.7. Right, let us move on. The last game of this, Spurs and Hull City. You'd expect this pretty much to be one-way traffic, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw Chelsea play Hull. They absolutely battered them. In fairness, Hull have gotten a few good results, and they've kind of surprised us a little. Obviously, Grady was missing there recently. I'm not sure he's going to be available for
He
this
is
game.
back, yeah.
Yeah, he's back.
He's back, yes. I mean, that impacts things positively for Hull, but you would still expect Tottenham to be just far too strong. I think Townsend really, he's probably a must-have midfielder, and I know that probably sounds like you're getting on the hype because he got that goal for England. But when you look at what he's doing, every time he gets the ball, he's dribbling past there, he's coming inside, and he's shooting or he's crossing the ball. Very effective, very direct, going straight towards the goal.
He has that sort of Bale role. I suppose he stepped into the Bale role of sort of coming in off that wing. And when he does come off the wing, it allows Walker to overlap him, and Walker can use his pace then.
Yeah.
So they seem to be working pretty well together.
When they say you put Lennon on that side, now Lennon, he's probably available for selection. I don't think he's going to get a game. But again, Lennon and Walker, as you point out, they very much do the same thing going down the wing, whereas Townsend's giving them a new dimension. So I would be saying it must have fifth midfielder, but you play him in this game, and the Soldado frustrates me. So
yeah, I mean, I do, again, very much like I just said about Ravel Morrison. I do wonder whether we're kind of bowing to the hype put on by the English media about an English player. Townsend, you're right, has had some good performances. He's averaging an attempt every 19.1 minutes, but he's only got one goal.
That's fairly high though for a midfielder,
Yeah, but when you look at his goal conversion rate is 3.2, which is very, very low. And I mean, I seen his interview after the game at the weekend, and he kind of, said the goal, and he said, listen, he was kind of like, listen, that was a cross, I'm never going, but I'll take it, but I'm probably due it given the amount of shots and efforts I've had that have been deflected or just gone nearly wide. So, I mean, maybe that's the turning point. Maybe now with those amount of attempts that he is getting, we can see something from him.
What I liked about him was the fact that he said, listen, forget about all this hype about me over the last few weeks. My job at the moment is trying to get onto the Spurs first team.
Yeah, and he was very honest about it.
Yeah.
He said he was trying to keep his feet in the ground. That it was great. It was great to get his first goal in his debut for England, and also now his first goal for Tottenham in the Premier League. There is a little bit of worry there that if his form does dip over the next couple of weeks, you will see him back out again with the likes of Lennon and Chadley there and Lamela. There's a couple of options, and you got to look at Spurs lineup last weekend. I mean, AVB dropped Dembele and Eriksen, and that's the first time Dembele's been dropped all season. And Eriksen probably was probably dropped due to his international commitments. But having said that, Paulinho was certainly one that I think is rotation proof and has popped up. He was a little frustrating towards the kind of the game week 2, 3 and 4. He's starting to come into it now and is doing quite well. And I know Paul was kind of saying Soldado frustrates, but
he's still good. He's a good player.
He is a good player. I know he was dropped in game week 7 in favour of Defoe, but that was after Defoe had scored a couple of goals in the Europa League, so you kind of had to give him a run because Spurs were struggling from goals from open play. But surprisingly enough, I mean, with a goal and assist last week and maximum bonus points for Soldado, he's now up to 5th in the FPL standings for forwards, and he's played a part in 5 of Tottenham's 8 goals this season. So, at 9.2, 10% ownership rate, I think he still could be one that could turn it around.
Just a word of caution on Andros Townsend. Just having a look at his history this season, he didn't play any minutes in the first game. He's played over 60 minutes in every other game.
Yeah, he started the last 7 straight.
But his points are 6 in game week 2, then 2, then 3, then 2, then 2, then 2, then 10.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes to show, like we were saying about his attempt rate. He's got a high attempt rate, but his conversion rate is very, very low. Hopefully, like we said, this fluke, I suppose, for want of a better word of a goal, is one that can turn it around for him, and he's certainly one to keep an eye on.
So that is that. It is time, in fact, for Captain's Picks. Right, so where are we going to go this week? Captain's Picks. Phil, what's your first thoughts?
Straight away, I've got to look at Ozil. I think it'd be rude not to, and you know me, I don't like to be rude. I think after his performance last week, I think going to Palace is one that you could look at. Again, there is a caveat there that with Arsenal in Champions League action, there could be a slight hangover, but due to the fact that their travel is reduced to, yes, they return to London and then trip across London again to play Palace, that kind of will work in their favour. I think had they been travelling a little bit further, maybe, you might have seen some sort of ill effect. But certainly for me, I think Ozil is certainly one to look at. And then you've got to really look at Liverpool. It's Sturridge or Suarez, both scoring goals, both getting in the points. I've got Sturridge, I don't have Suarez, so for me, Sturridge will be one to look at. And yeah, outside shout then is probably looking towards Aguero against Chelsea.
Okay. The ones that strike me, Paul, are a Spurs player at home to Hull, or a Man United player at home to Stoke, or indeed an Arsenal player away to Crystal Palace. Where are you going?
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, I'm probably going to captain Ozil. I don't know if he's going to have a danger of rotation. Well, I'll deal with that closer to the weekend. And so he will be the captain of choice for me. And then
vice captain coming from where?
Vice captain is between Ramsey and Rooney for me at the moment. But I mean, realistically, will United throw 4 or 5 against Stoke? Probably not. Paulinho is on the radar. Probably a bit much to make him captain, but again, I mean, if you're looking at a Spurs player who has been very close to getting a lot of points, he is your man. I have him in the team there, and if I was to hear Ozil wasn't playing, I probably would go there looking at my own personal team. But it would really be a toss between him and Ramsey. And Rooney, he's always on the mind as long as he's in the team,
Yeah, I think for me, I think I'll boringly agree with everyone. Probably Ozil, Giroud and Rooney are where my captain and vice captain will come from. We have no questions this week.